All right, get ready, because we're about to explore angels. We've got excerpts from an article about them, and turns out there's a lot more to these beings than just, the winged figures we typically think of.
That's right. Even the word angel itself means messenger.
Oh, really?
Yeah, in both Greek and Hebrew,
Interesting.
which kind of gives you a clue about their main role in all these different belief systems.
So it's like their job description is right there in their name.
Exactly.
But how much do we have to change our idea of what an angel is? We all have that classic image in our heads.
Oh, you'll definitely need to think outside the box on this one. The idea of angels has changed a lot over time and across different religions, and some of those descriptions are way more complicated than just a human with wings.
Okay,
Yeah.
so let's break this down. Where do these beings even come from? How do we even start to understand that?
Well, if you think back to those early cultures and how they explain the world, they saw gods in everything, the sun, storms, rivers, these powerful forces that were often unpredictable. And as the belief in one God started to emerge, those forces were reinterpreted. They became angels acting on God's behalf in the world.
So instead of like a separate god for each element, they became these specialized messengers and forces carrying out a higher will.
Exactly. It's especially important in religions where God is seen as more distant, more transcendent. You need someone or something to bridge the gap between the divine and humanity.
Yeah, you need someone to deliver the messages. You mentioned different religions having unique takes. I'm really interested in how the Abrahamic religions approach angels, like Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. What are some of the key differences there?
Well, let's start with Judaism. Here, angels are completely subordinate to God, following his commands with no free will of their own.
Wow.
What's really interesting is that they're seen as inferior to humans who follow the Torah.
Wait, really? So you're saying that living a righteous life, I could be higher the pecking order than an angel?
That's a key part of Jewish thought.
Wow, I never would have guessed that.
Now, Christianity sees angels as intermediaries between God and humanity, playing all kinds of roles in the Bible.
Right.
They're protectors, warriors, messengers, and even comforters.
Like when the angel appeared to Mary to announce Jesus' birth.
Exactly. And then there's Islam, where angels are super important to the faith.
Right.
They're seen as pure beings of light. They have reason and even face tests from God.
So even angels have to prove themselves. What kind of tests are we talking about?
It varies, but the idea is that they're subject to God's will and judgment too.
Yeah.
It really highlights how important obedience and submission are, even for these beings that seem perfect.
That adds a whole other layer to the picture.
Yeah.
It sounds like angels aren't just limited to the Abrahamic religions, though, right?
You're absolutely right. In Zoroastrianism, you've got this concept of Fravashi.
Fravashi.
Yeah, they're like guardian angels, but in Zoroastrianism, they watch over all beings, not just humans.
Oh, interesting.
Each person, each animal, even plants, have a Fravashi guiding and protecting it.
So it's a much broader concept of guardianship than we might be used to.
Exactly. And then in the Baha'i faith, the founder Baha'u'llah describes angels as people who've reached a higher spiritual level. They've shed their human limitations and taken on these angelic attributes.
So they're like evolved humans who've gone beyond our earthly limits and become something more.
Exactly. And then you have traditions like Theosophy, which has a more esoteric approach.
Right.
They believe in devas, nature spirits, fairies, all possessing these etheric bodies and influencing the natural world.
So many interpretations. You mentioned earlier something about angelic hierarchies.
Yeah, a lot of traditions, especially Kabbalah and Christian theology, describe different levels within the angelic world. You can think of it like a massive organizational chart
Wow.
where angels are organized based on what they do and how close they are to God. So you have your regular angels, but then there's archangels, seraphim, cherubim. It gets pretty complex.
Like there's a whole society up there with different levels of authority and responsibility.
Exactly, and each of those types of angels might have different jobs, powers, and even ways of interacting with us.
This is making me realize how much depth there is to the whole idea of angels. We're definitely going to need a whole separate exploration just to unpack this whole angelic hierarchy.
That's a great idea. But for now, let's switch gears and explore something a bit different. The concept of fallen angels.
Oh yeah, the rebel angels. Now this is where things get really interesting. Tell me more.
Okay, so we'll start by looking at how different traditions explain why these angels fell from grace. It's a story that's both captivating and really makes you think.
I can't wait to hear it.
All right, let's dive in. We'll begin by exploring how these different traditions explain why and how these angels fell from grace.
Okay.
It's a story that's captivating and thought-provoking all at the same time. So it's really fascinating how this whole idea of fallen angels, it just adds this whole other layer to the angelic world, you know?
Right, like it's this cosmic soap opera with good versus evil and loyalty and betrayal all playing out on this grand scale.
Exactly. And just like we saw with angels in general, different traditions have their own unique takes on, how and why these angels fell from grace.
So what are some of the common threads in these stories about fallen angels? Where do they usually go wrong?
Well, one of the most common themes is pride and just this insatiable desire for power. A lot of these stories show these angels rebelling against God because they want to take his power and rule themselves.
Yeah, it's that classic power struggle.
Mm.
The age-old story of ambition leading to downfall. We see it everywhere, even in heaven.
Absolutely. And in some traditions, the fall is tied to this refusal to acknowledge just how important humanity is.
Oh. Huh.
These angels saw humans as these lesser creations, and they just couldn't accept their place in the grand scheme of things.
So it's like this cosmic jealousy or resentment that's fueling their rebellion.
That's one way to look at it.
Yeah.
Now, in Christianity, the fall of angels is closely linked to Satan, who's seen as the leader of this rebellion.
Right. Satan, Lucifer, the devil, all these names for this ultimate embodiment of evil. He's become the symbol of everything that goes against God's will.
Exactly. In Christian belief, he's that ultimate tempter, trying to lead humanity away from God and into darkness. He's the one who embodies those forces that oppose goodness and righteousness.
It's a little scary when you think about it, this powerful being going against everything that's good and holy.
It definitely adds some drama to the whole cosmic story.
Yeah.
And Islam has a similar character named Iblis.
Okay.
He wouldn't bow down to Adam because he thought he was better than humans since he was made of fire and humans were made from clay.
It's that same idea of pride and disobedience leading to a downfall, even for beings as powerful as angels.
Yes, it really emphasizes how important it is to obey God's will in these traditions. Even angels aren't exempt from that.
Wow.
But, the idea of fallen angels isn't only found in these major religions.
Oh, right. You mentioned all those different interpretations of angels earlier. Do those other beliefs have their own versions of fallen angels too?
Absolutely. In Zoroastrianism, for example, there are the Devas.
The what?
The Devas. They started out as good deities, but they ended up being associated with evil and darkness, opposing the good forces led by Ahura Mazda.
So it's like they completely flipped. These beings who were once good turn around and embrace darkness.
That's a great way to put it. And then you've got certain esoteric traditions, like some branches of Kabbalah, where they see the fall of angels as a necessary part of the cosmic order.
Wait, so for them it's not a bad thing. How does that work?
It's a really interesting perspective. In these interpretations, they see the fall as a part of a bigger process, maybe even like divine sparks coming down to the material world with the goal of eventually going back to their divine source.
Oh, wow. That's a completely different way of thinking about it. It makes the whole concept of good and evil, fallen and unfallen, a lot less black and white and a lot more complex.
Exactly. It highlights just how diverse and even contradictory different belief systems are when they talk about these powerful angelic beings.
It's mind-blowing when you think about all these different interpretations of the same idea. It makes you wonder, what is it about these beings that keeps us so interested across cultures and all throughout history?
It really is remarkable. I think it's this deeply rooted fascination with the unknown, with the idea of beings existing on a different level, closer to the divine.
Yeah, I get that. Makes you wonder about what could be out there beyond what we can see, about these powerful beings maybe influencing our world, for good or for bad.
Exactly. And both these radiant angels and the fallen ones, they give us a way to explore those questions, to think about good versus evil, obedience and rebellion, and even the nature of God himself.
You know, hearing all of this, it makes me see these stories in a whole new light. It's not just good versus evil, it's about our connection to the divine, about the choices we make and what happens because of them.
I'm glad to hear that. And, the impact of these narratives on art, literature, even pop culture is huge.
Well, absolutely. Angels are everywhere, from old paintings to modern movies. We can't get enough of them.
It's true. They tap into our imaginations and give us a glimpse into the mysteries of the spiritual realm. And even though they're portrayed differently across cultures and religions, there's something about them that appeals to everyone.
They touch on something deep inside us, like this longing to connect with something bigger than ourselves, to believe in something beyond the material world. And in a way, both fallen and unfallen angels, Let us explore those possibilities.
I think that's beautifully said.
Thing.
And this leads us to something really interesting about how these figures have been shown throughout history, visually.
Okay, now this is where I get really interested. Let's talk about those classic images of angels in art. The wings, halos, and robes. Where did all of that come from?
You're right. It's fascinating how artists have captured the essence of these beings, often taking inspiration from religious texts and traditions.
I mean, who doesn't love those classic images of angels with their majestic wings and glowing halos? They're so iconic.
They're incredibly striking, and those images have become a part of how we imagine them. But if we look at the earliest descriptions of angels, especially in the Bible, they don't always have wings.
Really? So if the Bible doesn't always say they have wings, where did that image come from?
It seems to have come later, possibly influenced by the images associated with gods and supernatural beings in Greek and Roman mythology.
Ah, like Nike, the winged goddess of victory. The Greeks loved their winged figures.
Exactly. Over time, wings became this powerful symbol of transcendence, representing the ability to move between heaven and earth.
That makes sense. It adds to the awe and wonder surrounding these beings that are already extraordinary.
Precisely. And it's not just wings, the
Right.
halos, the flowing robes, the radiant light, they all work together to create this feeling of otherworldly beauty and power.
And then you have those depictions of warrior angels, like the Archangel Michael, often shown with swords and armor, ready to fight evil.
Ah, yes, the classic image of the warrior angel, a powerful symbol of divine protection and strength.
It really gets across that idea of angels as protectors of what's right, acting on behalf of divine justice.
Absolutely, but it's not always about beauty and power. There are also these really interesting and sometimes even terrifying depictions of angels in more esoteric traditions.
Right, those traditions often have some really unique and mind-bending interpretations of angels.
For example, the Ophanim, described in the Hebrew Bible as these wheel-like beings covered in eyes.
Wheels covered in eyes.
Yes. Wow. They're often depicted in ways that challenge our typical human-centered view of angels.
That's not something you see every day. It's like they're connected to a completely different kind of cosmic energy, something we just can't fully understand.
Exactly. And these kinds of depictions remind us that the angelic realm is vast and diverse, with beings that are both familiar and completely alien to our limited understanding.
It's like they're pushing us to expand our imagination, to think about a reality beyond our limited human experience.
I think that's a great way to put it, and through all these different depictions in art, literature, and mythology, we can keep exploring and be captivated by this enduring mystery of angels.
You know, it's amazing how angels have been a part of our imagination for so long. They're in art, literature, music, everywhere you look.
Yeah, it's true. They've become a part of our stories, and they reflect our deepest hopes and fears.
And our fascination with the spiritual world, right?
Exactly.
And it's not just a thing of the past either. Angels are still popping up everywhere in modern media, from movies and TV shows to even pop music.
Absolutely. We're still drawn to stories about angels, no matter if they have a modern twist or are more traditional.
I think it's because they provide this timeless inspiration. They let us explore those really big questions of good versus evil, faith and doubt, and what it truly means to be human.
Yeah, those themes are always relevant, no matter the time period. But what's really interesting is how those portrayals often reflect the values and anxieties of the time they're created in.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Like these days, you see a lot of movies and shows where angels are more complex characters.
Mhm.
They're wrestling with their own issues and even questioning their place in the divine plan. It's not as simple as it used to be.
That's a big change from those traditional depictions of angels as just perfect beings, always obedient to God's will.
Yeah, it's like we're putting our own human struggles onto these celestial beings. We're trying to work through those difficult questions about morality and free will through their stories.
It is fascinating how these ancient figures can be reinterpreted to reflect our changing understanding of ourselves and the universe.
Yeah, they're like a mirror reflecting our own spiritual and philosophical journeys.
That's a great way to put it. I think as long as we keep thinking about life's big questions, angels in all their forms will continue to captivate us.
I think you're right. There's something about them that makes us feel wonder and possibility, a glimpse into something beyond the everyday world.
Yeah.
It's hard not to be drawn to that.
Absolutely. Whether we actually believe they exist or see them as powerful symbols, the fact that they're still so present in our culture says a lot about how they affect us.
So, as we wrap up our exploration of angels, what's the one key takeaway you would like our listeners to remember?
I think the most important thing is to remember just how diverse the views are on angels across different cultures, religions, and even throughout history. You can't define them with just one definition.
It's definitely not a one-size-fits-all concept.
And that's what makes them so interesting. They offer a way for us to examine our own beliefs about the divine, good, and evil, and ultimately, what it means to be human.
This has been an amazing journey. I feel like I understand these mysterious beings in a whole new way.
Me too. And just remember, there's always more to learn about angels, more layers to discover.
I'm sure this isn't the last time we'll be talking about them. There's just so much more to uncover.
I think you're right. But for now, I hope everyone listening will take some time to reflect on what we've talked about, maybe even explore some of the sources themselves.
And hey, who knows? Maybe they'll even have their own encounter with an angel, whatever that might look like.
That's right. Keep searching, keep asking questions, and always be open to the wonders of the universe.
Well said. Happy exploring, everyone.